In 1871, a man named Wallace Tanner was hired to document the demolition of an old civic building in Cincinnati, Ohio. His job was simple: photograph the walls before they came down, write the measurements, record the date. He photographed 3 floors, then he stopped. His supervisor later wrote in a single line, and I am reading this exactly as it appears in the Ohio Historical Society's preserved correspondence archive. Tanner refused to continue after the 3rd floor. No further documentation was submitted, no explanation, no resignation letter, no termination record, just stopped. The building was demolished in October of that year. What Wallace Tanner saw beneath the 3rd floor of that building was never recorded. But the shape of what he didn't say tells you almost everything. There is a specific problem with the way we date old buildings, and I don't mean a small error, a decade off, a century off. I mean the foundational logic we use to confirm when a building was built is almost entirely based on documentation created after the building already existed. Think about that for a moment. We don't date the building, we date the paperwork about the building. And paperwork can be written at any time. Here is how the process actually works. A city record office opens a file. That file contains a permit application, a contractor's invoice, a city council approval notice. Historians look at that file and say, built in 1871. But that file doesn't tell you when the stone was cut. It doesn't tell you when the foundation was laid. It tells you when someone created a document about a building. Those are not the same thing. In fact, they may have nothing to do with each other. In 1887, a municipal records clerk in St. Louis, Missouri, named Arthur Hollis, submitted a report to the city board noting that 17 civic buildings in the downtown district had construction permits filed after their reported completion dates. Not before, after. The board reviewed the report, acknowledged it, and then filed it under a category called Administrative Corrections. Arthur Hollis's report was not referenced again in the official record until 2003, when a graduate student found it in a storage archive that was being cleared out for renovation. The graduate student published a footnote about it. A footnote. That is the level of attention this kind of discovery receives. In 1994, a small team of architectural historians at the University of Edinburgh began cataloging what they called institutional anomalies in European civic buildings. Their focus was not on conspiracy. It was on structural dating using mortar analysis, stone weathering, and subfloor sediment composition to independently verify recorded construction dates. This is not guesswork, this is geology. Stone weathers at measurable documented rates. Mortar cures and degrades according to known chemical timelines. Subfloor sediment layers can be read like rings in a tree trunk. They examined 34 buildings across 6 cities. In 23 of those buildings, that is 23 out of 34, the structural material dating was older than the official construction record, not by years, by decades, in 7 cases by more than a century. I want you to understand what that actually means. It means that if you visited one of those buildings tomorrow and you stood in front of its plaque, the date on that plaque would be demonstrably incorrect according to the material the building is made of, not according to theory, according to chemistry. The study was published in a journal called the Vernacular Architecture Forum. It received almost no coverage. 2 years after publication, the lead researcher, Dr. Malcolm Briggs, was listed as having retired. He was 44 years old. The 3 co-authors of the study moved to unrelated fields within 5 years. There was no follow-up study. No institution took up the methodology. No city commissioned a review of its own buildings. The paper exists, The data exists, and then silence. The silence itself is a kind of evidence. Now here is where I want you to stop scrolling and actually stay with me, because this isn't about one building and it's not about one city. It's about yours. There is a building in your city right now, a courthouse, a post office, a train station, a museum that has a plaque near the front door. That plaque has a date on it, and almost no one has ever asked who put that plaque there, or when, or why that date and not the one before it. Someone chose that number. Someone had it cast in bronze. Someone bolted it to a wall. And for 150 years, the people walking past it every morning have simply assumed it was correct. Because why would anyone lie about when a building was built? That is exactly the right question. And I want you to hold it, because the answer is not what you expect. Between 1870 and 1900, a span of just 30 years, dozens of American and European cities erected buildings of extraordinary scale and complexity. Stone columns, 12 feet in diameter, domed ceilings painted with 70-foot murals, marble floors laid with microscopic precision across surfaces the size of city blocks. The standard historical explanation is simple: the Industrial Revolution. Machines, migration, money. But there is a specific problem with that explanation. The machines that supposedly built these structures, the cranes, the hoisting equipment, the steam-powered lifts, were not rated for the weights involved. I am not speculating about this. This is a documented engineering constraint. In 1873, the heaviest commercially available crane in the United States had a rated capacity of 14 tons. The cornerstone of Philadelphia City Hall, a single piece of granite, weighs 22 tons. That is not a small discrepancy. That is a 57% excess over the maximum rated capacity of the best available equipment. And Philadelphia City Hall is not unusual. It is typical. The Nashville Parthenon, a full-scale reproduction of the ancient Greek temple built in Tennessee in 1897, contains columns of solid concrete and stone that required lifting equipment its builders, according to every surviving invoice, simply did not own. The Cincinnati Music Hall, begun in 1878, has a main arch span of 95 feet. The structural calculations required for that arch, which still stands today, would have required engineering software that wasn't developed until the 1960s. Historians call this intuitive structural mastery. I call it a gap in the explanation that nobody is in a hurry to fill. And then there are the construction timelines. Vienna's Ringstrasse, the grand boulevard of monumental civic buildings that transformed the Austrian capital, was completed between 1857 and 1879. 22 years, 14 buildings, over 3 kilometers of continuous monumental architecture. The workforce records that survive show approximately 1,800 registered laborers. By modern engineering estimates using the technology of the 1870s, those buildings would have required a minimum of 11,000 workers working simultaneously. The gap between the documented workforce and the required workforce is roughly 500%. Either the records are incomplete or something else is happening. The construction photographs of that era are unusual for buildings of this claimed complexity. Buildings that supposedly required thousands of laborers working for years. The photographic record is remarkably thin, strangely, formally thin. Photography existed by the 1840s. By the 1870s, photographic documentation of large construction projects was standard practice. We have thousands of photographs from this period of bridges being built, railways being laid, factories going up, girder by girder, day by day. But for the civic stone buildings, the ones with the columns, the domes, the marble floors, The photographs that exist tend to show buildings in one of two states, nearly complete or already finished, almost nothing in between, not the foundations being laid, not the walls going up, not the columns being hoisted into position by cranes that, as we have established, were not rated to lift them, just there, as if the camera only arrived after the question had already been settled. Here is the part that took me the longest to sit with, because I kept trying to find a simpler explanation. In 1893, the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago unveiled 200 buildings, massive, ornate, structurally complex, built in 18 months. 200 buildings, 18 months. Historians call this the White City. They say it was temporary, built of plaster and steel lath to simulate permanence, and that is partially true. Many of the buildings were indeed temporary structures, but partially true is doing a great deal of work in that sentence. Because the buildings of the White City were not simple sheds covered in plaster. The Manufacturers and Liberal Arts Building, the largest building at the fair, was at the time of its construction the largest enclosed space in human history. It covered 31 acres under a single roof. The steel frame alone required 18,000 tons of structural steel. The building was reportedly completed in under 8 months in 1891 with 1891 technology. And here is what they don't mention in the same breath. Several of those buildings were photographed before the official groundbreaking date, not after, before. The photographs were later labeled as pre-construction planning images. That classification was added in 1941, not in 1893, not in 1900, in 1941. 48 years after the fair, someone looked at those photographs, noticed the problem, and created a category of explanation to contain it. I want to be precise about what I am saying. I am not saying those photographs prove the buildings existed before the fair. I am saying that the explanation for the photographs was created half a century later by people who were not there, for reasons that were never documented, and that specifically is the part that I cannot move past. There is another category of structures that fits this pattern, and it is one that almost no one talks about in these terms. Across North America, Europe, and parts of Asia, there are hundreds of what historians call star forts, multi-pointed, geometrically precise defensive structures built according to official records between the 15th and 18th centuries. The standard explanation is that they were military fortifications designed to deflect cannon fire, and that may be true of some of them. But here is what the military explanation doesn't account for. Many of these structures are built in locations that have no strategic defensive value. They face the wrong direction for the threats that supposedly prompted their construction. Their geometric precision exceeds anything required by military engineering, and a significant number of them are built around a central point, a well, a tower, a raised platform that served no military function anyone has satisfactorily explained. In 1847, a US Army surveyor named James Prescott was tasked with mapping existing fortifications in the Louisiana Territory. He submitted his report on time, but he attached a personal addendum, 3 handwritten pages, in which he noted that at least 4 of the structures he had surveyed showed foundation layers predating the reported construction by what he estimated to be not less than 2 generations. His addendum was not included in the official filing. It was found separately in a box of personal papers donated to a regional archive by his estate in 1901. Nobody was looking for it, and then there is Lahore. The Lahore Museum, established according to its own records in 1865, is housed in a building of such ornate Mughal Gothic structural detail that entire academic careers have been built around its construction technique. The building combines Mughal arch geometry with Gothic load-bearing principles in a way that structural engineers today describe as, and I'm quoting a 2011 paper from the Pakistan Journal of Engineering and Applied Sciences, technically sophisticated beyond what should have been achievable given the documented resources of the period. One study published in 1982 by a structural engineer named Farooq Tashkentov went further. His analysis of the lower foundation stones showed weathering patterns consistent with at minimum 200 years of pre-industrial exposure. The stones at the base of the Lahore Museum, according to Tashkentov's measurements, were already 200 years old when the building was supposedly being constructed. The paper was published. The follow-up study that was promised never appeared. Tashkentov's name does not appear in the academic literature. After 1984, he was 38 years old at the time of his last publication. There is a particular kind of silence that follows a study like Tashkentov's. It is not the silence of disagreement. Disagreement produces arguments, counter studies, rebuttals. This is different. This is the silence of something being set aside. Carefully, quietly, permanently. There is one more piece of this that I need to place in front of you, because it connects the buildings to something larger. The 1870 US Census, the same decade in which all of these extraordinary civic buildings were supposedly being constructed, recorded a significant and still unexplained gap between the documented urban population and the labor supply required for the construction projects underway. In simple terms, the workers who supposedly built these buildings, there weren't enough of them. Not according to conspiracy theory, according to the census. The recorded workforce in Philadelphia in 1870 was approximately 180,000 people. The construction projects active in that city during that decade, if built using the methods and timelines officially recorded, would have required a sustained labor force of over 400,000, more than twice the documented population of the entire working city. Historians explain this through undercounting, migration, and temporary labor. Those are real factors. They are also not sufficient to close a gap of that size. And when you see the same gap proportionally in Vienna in the 1860s, in Edinburgh in the 1850s, in Lahore in the 1860s, it stops looking like a gap in the data. It starts looking like a gap in the story. This is not a list of coincidences. A coincidence happens once, maybe twice. A pattern happens everywhere, in every city, in every century, on every plaque, near every front door. And the pattern says one thing: these buildings were not built when they said, some of them were not built by who they said, and the oldest ones, the ones with the deepest foundations and the heaviest stones, some of them may not have been built at all, in the sense that we understand building. I want to tell you what this means. I genuinely want to give you an answer, a clean one, a logical one, the kind that lets you close the tab and move on with your day. But I can't. Not because I haven't looked, because the more you look, the more you notice that the answers stop exactly where the questions get uncomfortable. The records end. The researchers retire at 38, at 44, at the exact moment their work reaches a conclusion someone didn't want reached. The photographs get relabeled 48 years after the fact by people who weren't there. The reports get filed under administrative corrections. The addendums get separated from the official filing and end up in a box of personal papers that nobody opens for 50 years. And the buildings just stand there, older than their plaques, heavier than their cranes, quieter than their history. Wallace Tanner stopped photographing in 1871. We don't know what he saw, but we know he never worked in documentation again. And we know that the building he was supposed to record, the one demolished in October of that year, had its foundations sealed with concrete before the demolition crew arrived. Someone filled it in before anyone could measure it, I'm not going to tell you what that means, but I'd like to know what you think it means because I've been sitting with this for a long time and I'm tired of sitting with it alone.